Hey, Rufus! New idea for a segment here. Instead of talking about the origins of certain words, we talk about particular phrases or speech patterns in English that are new or weird or ungrammatical. I have no idea. It's gotta be something clever though, because this is a language channel. Something like, I like the alliteration there, yeah. Or like, that's not bad either. Or maybe, okay, that metaphor is a bit tortured there. Wait, I've got it. Check this out. It's just a placeholder for now. We can change it later. Anyway, here's what we're talking about today. You can think of it as the thing is construction. In linguistic scholarship, it's called the double is. It's almost exclusively a spoken phenomenon. Most people wouldn't produce this construction in writing. Now, this phrasing is exceedingly common. You've probably used it yourself 100 times. Here's some examples of how this thing crops up in spoken English. Not only is this kind of double is not rare, it's also not new. You can find examples of people saying this sort of thing for the past 50 years or more. Great question, Rufus. Thanks for asking. Strictly speaking, these sentences are ungrammatical because the second is or was serves no syntactic purpose. It doesn't need to be there. If we look at the examples I gave before, we can see how those sentences are coordinated without the extra verbs. In the first example, the subject of the sentence is the noun thing, and the verb of that first clause is. Then we have the conjunction that to introduce the second clause. There's nothing for the extra is to do, and it serves no purpose whatsoever. Same thing in the last example with the double was. The middle example uses an infinitive instead of another clause after the conjunction that, but still, the first clause has a subject, purpose, and a verb, is. The second is does nothing and shouldn't be there. That's the question, isn't it? Why do people do this? Linguists have been arguing about this very question for decades. There are a few different theories, and most of them seem plausible enough, although there isn't one grand unifying theory that explains every documented use of double is. But what about you, dear viewers? Why do you think people do this when they talk? Oh, no, not really. The explanations put forth by linguists are pretty technical. It's called engagement, Rufus. Apparently it's what makes or breaks your YouTube channel. Time's up. See if you're on the right track about what's going on here. Before we get into positive theories about the double is thing, let's rule out a tempting explanation: disfluency. That's just a fancy word for when you're speaking extemporaneously and get stuck or lost for a moment and interrupt your speech. Filler words like and stopping mid-sentence and then restarting, correcting an error, these are all called disfluencies. But given some observations about how the double is thing appears to work, it seems that it's not just a stutter or momentary lapse in fluency. It seems to follow rules and appear for a purpose. So, what could explain this construction? One theory says there's a suppressed what in the first part of the sentence. That is to say, the speaker imagines the word what at the beginning of the sentence but doesn't actually say it. If you take any of the examples I gave originally and add a what to the beginning, all three become grammatically correct sentences. The what turns the first part of the sentence into a noun clause that functions as the subject of the second is. These aren't the most elegant phrasings, I'll admit, but they're at least grammatical. The only problem with this theory is actually the only problem with any double is theory. There are examples that it can't explain, like these. Yes, these are actual things that people have said. In examples like these, adding a what at the beginning doesn't fix them, so this theory isn't perfect. A second theory is that the double is a result of the speaker blending together two different analyses of the same sentence. For example, take this grammatically correct sentence with no double is. According to this theory, the speaker might analyze the sentence in two different ways, with the is going with the first part or the second part. Mixing these two analyses together results in the double is. What I'd like to say is that I completely agree. The arguments against this theory are a little more technical, but basically there's some skepticism that it's really possible to analyze the sentence with the is going with the first part rather than the second part. It also predicts that there should be a double R in examples like this, but nobody's been documented as saying something with this form. Instead, there are examples of people phrasing it this way, which suggests that the is doing something else here. Here's a third idea. The second is in the double is construction is a focus particle. Again, sounds a bit technical, but it's pretty straightforward. Words that aren't major parts of speech, like nouns and verbs and adjectives, and have unchangeable forms are broadly called particles. Focus in a language is a lot like emphasis. In spoken English, we generally convey it through word stress. For example, you can read this sentence with different emphasis to place the focus in different places. Bob has a blue car. 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 We can also use words to indicate focus, usually adverbs like only, just, even, also, or prepositional phrases like in particular or for example. By this analysis of the double is construction, the second is acting as a focus particle, a little fixed word that just says, hey, look at this next part, it's important, but isn't intended to affect the grammar of the sentence. It's a little bit strange that we'd use a finite form of the verb to be for this purpose, but it's not completely unheard of cross-linguistically. This theory explains almost all examples of double is. The only thing it doesn't really account for is when it happens with was instead of is. But the was examples are much less common, so I think this is the most complete theory so far. But what do you think? Does the focus particle theory best explain why people say the thing is, or do you like one of the other theories better? At the very least, now you're going to notice every time you hear someone or catch yourself saying the double is thing, so you're welcome. See you next time.